Good evening, my name is Dan Teets. I'm Director of Adult Faith Formation here at St. Mary's Church, and I'll be giving a tour of the church tonight. Thank you for joining us. Okay, the first thing that I want to point out to you tonight is actually in the Confessional. So if you want to walk over and look in there, there's a replica of Rembrandt's painting, The Return of the Prodigal Son, which is a beautiful story of forgiveness in Scripture, right? And so that's why that painting is in the Confessional. And so if you wanted to walk over there and take a look at that. And I encourage you, if you have a chance, to obtain an image of that painting and to spend some time reflecting on it, especially during Lent. It's a beautiful scene of the prodigal son coming home. So the first St. Mary's Church that was built on this site was a stone and wood structure built by Father Samuel Mazzucchelli. He came in the late 1830s and purchased the land for the church and also for the rectory next door. And he founded the parish. The first Mass that he said was with 28 parishioners in a house that's still standing down here on Lynch Street. And then eventually when the church was built in 1841, they had the first Mass of St. Mary's in the church. It was called the Church of the Assumption initially, and then after they started the construction of this church in 1867, they built it over the original church that Father Mazzucchelli had built, and they still had Mass in the original church while they were building this one over it. Like Father Hakeem said, I don't think OSHA would allow that today, but once this church was built, they took the smaller church apart, took it out the front door, and then they had this to put the pews in. This church was built for a cost of $75,000, the current church, in 1867 to 69. You can't even build a garage for that today, but it's worth way more than that today, obviously. Just the organ in the balcony is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this church was, this structure itself was completed in 1869. It was primarily German and Irish parishioners who built St. Mary's, and if the inscription on the outside of the confessional is in Old German, and it's from Ezekiel. It says, "God desires not the death of the sinner." And if you look, there's plaques, there's donor plaques on both sides here in the back. On this side, you have all the German names and what they donated. And on this side, you have all the Irish names and what they donated. And if you turn around and look at the high altar, on the right side of the painting is St. Boniface, the patron saint of Germany. So the Germans sat on this side where their donor plaque is. On the left side is St. Patrick, the patron of Ireland. And of course, the Irish sat on this side. The priest who had this church built was a German priest, Father Emans, and he purchased that high altar and the painting, and then the church was renamed St. Mary of the Visitation because of that painting in the high altar. He wanted the painting, and so then they renamed it from St. Mary of the Assumption to St. Mary of the Visitation, yeah. While we're back here, under that Irish donor plaque is the ambry, and that's where the oils are, and the oil of the infirm, the oil of catechumens, and the sacred chrism, which are used for the various rites. Sacred chrism, of course, being used for baptism and confirmation and ordination. So I invite you to move up a little bit further here. So yesterday, March 29th, was my 36th anniversary of becoming Catholic. So the first time I came to St. Mary's Church, I was Lutheran. And I walked in here with a Catholic friend, and I grew up in the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, a small church in Wallman, Iowa. Very plain, a cross, stained glass windows, but nobody depicted in the stained glass. And you can't see the windows tonight that well, but it's amazing. So I came in here with a friend of mine, and I'm looking at this church, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And, a Lutheran boy, she stops to genuflect in the pew, and I almost tripped over her right here in the main aisle because I didn't know about genuflecting. And so that was my first experience of this church. So fortunately, I didn't fall on my face. So I invite you to come forward a little further. The side depictions are the Stations of the Cross. Most consecrated chapels have Stations of the Cross. Some of them have simple stations, just like the crosses you see above these stations with numbers on them. You might see that as stations. Some are far more ornate. Stations of the Cross is a common Catholic devotion that's used during Lent. And generally it's on Fridays during Lent. Some parishes do it after a morning Mass during Lent. St. Patrick's, I think, does it after their Monday morning Mass here in Iowa City. But here at St. Mary's, we do it at 5 o'clock on Fridays during Lent, so you can come here to do the stations. There are also station booklets in the back of the church, and you can come in anytime and do the stations on your own. The apostles or disciples are depicted in the larger statues between the stained glass windows, and 11 of the 12 disciples were martyred. In Christian art, often a martyr is represented with the method of their death. And so you see St. Bartholomew here holding a fillet knife. His skin was filleted off of his body before he died. You see St. Andrew over here. In the winter, when I grow my beard, my daughters thought I looked kind of like St. Andrew. He has the X-shaped cross because he didn't deem himself worthy to be killed in the same way as Christ, so he asked to be crucified on an X-shaped cross, and that was what was offered as his way of martyrdom, crucifixion. Let's move over to the Mary altar. So the main parts of this altar are, of course, the tabernacle, and that's why the kneeler's here. The tabernacle is where the consecrated hosts are reserved after Mass, the leftover consecrated hosts, body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, for two purposes. One is for veneration. That's why we have the kneeler here, adoration. And the other is for distributing communion to the homebound and the hospitalized. And so people who are commissioned to that ministry can come and receive communion from the priest or deacon and take it out to the homebound and the hospitalized. This altar focuses on Mary. Do you know what the banner says above her head? Ave Maria, gratia plena. Who knows their Latin? I know Father Akin knows. Hail Mary, full of grace, right? The first part of the Hail Mary. So you have the angels holding the banner above her head, Mary appearing with the infant Jesus, but crowned as the fifth mystery, glorious mystery of the Rosary, crowned as Queen of Heaven and Earth. On the left of Mary, you have St. Bernard of Clairvaux. St. Bernard was said to be a great preacher whose words were as sweet as honey, and so he's depicted often with a beehive at his feet, and you'll see that on the right side of St. Bernard's feet there. On the right is St. Bonaventure, and he was a cardinal. He was raised a cardinal back in the days before they had automobiles, and so they rode on horseback to take his hat to him, to tell him he'd been made a cardinal. And he was a very humble servant of God, and he was outside doing dishes when they got there, and they said, "You've been made a cardinal, here's your hat." And he said, "Well, just hang it on that tree branch and I'll get it when I'm done doing dishes." I can't answer that question. Yeah. I don't know who gets to choose the statues that are used in particular parts of the church. The next thing you'll see is the winged creatures, the ox, the man, the eagle, and the lion. The winged creatures that are mentioned in the Old Testament, in the prophets, and then they're also used to depict the evangelists. And so you'll see them again when we get to the high altar, and it shows the evangelists. The lower level of figures are people from the Old Testament: Moses with the Ten Commandments, King David, Isaiah, and Ezekiel, with Latin quotes from each of those books in the scriptures. Generally, where there's a tabernacle, there's a presence candle lit next to the tabernacle to tell you that Christ is truly present there. That's the reason for the candle. And it's the only time you won't see that lit is on Good Friday, right? When the tabernacle's open, the hosts are not there any longer, and the candle is out, and then it's relit at Holy Saturday. A story about when St. Patrick's, that used to be downtown on Lynn Street, was destroyed on Holy Thursday by a tornado 15 years ago. And the next day, after the St. Patrick's had been hit by the tornado, Father Jeff went over there, and he went past the caution tape and stuff, and he went in, walking over the fallen bricks, because the steeple fell off the back, and the whole back was open. But when he went in, the presence candle was still lit next to the tabernacle after the tornado had destroyed the church. So I love that story. So you're welcome to come up into the sanctuary, and I'll share a little bit about what we find up here. When you come to Mass, you'll notice that the focus of the Mass changes places. It starts with the presider's chair. Generally, the presider is a priest. Sometimes it can be the bishop, priest and deacon usually, sometimes bishop and priest. And then we have other chairs that we can pull out if we have guests, concelebrants. So it starts with the presider's chair, and then for the liturgy of the word, it moves to the lectern. So there's three names for this: lectern, ambo, and pulpit, right? And that's where the word is proclaimed. And so a layperson will proclaim the Old Testament reading generally, and then the cantor will come over from the musician's side to proclaim the responsorial psalm, and then a second layperson, or the same one, will proclaim the New Testament epistle, and then finally the deacon or priest will come over from the chair and proclaim the gospel. And so that's all done. The liturgy of the word is primarily, the focus is the pulpit or the ambo. And then for the second part of the Mass, the liturgy of the Eucharist, the focus moves to the altar of sacrifice. And so I'm going to focus on the main altar and share some of what's here, who's depicted on the main altar. Who do you think is the top statues there on the main altar? Mary and Jesus? That's a common guess. It's actually Anne and Mary. It's actually the grandmother and mother of Jesus. So the top statues on this high altar are St. Anne and St. Mary. And then as you move down, we have the painting of the Visitation, where St. Mary went to visit her cousin Elizabeth. St. Mary's pregnant with Jesus at the time. Elizabeth was pregnant with John the Baptist. And when they encountered each other, John the Baptist leapt in Elizabeth's womb, recognizing Christ. And so it's a beautiful painting of the Visitation. The left side again is St. Patrick, and that's, the Irish all sat there. St. Boniface, the patron of Germany. And then when you get down to the next level, it's the evangelists. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're each depicted with one of those winged creatures mentioned in the Old Testament and also in the book of Revelation. The winged human, lion, ox, and eagle. In the middle, you have the angels with the grain and the grapes that become the bread and the wine that become at the consecration the body and blood of Christ. And then here at St. Mary's, we have a relic of the true cross in our veneration cross here. So this relic, you can get closer to this, but this is a reliquary. There's 2 fragments of the original cross are in there, and so that's when we venerate the cross on Good Friday, there's actually a part of the true cross there in St. Mary's cross. And how do we know it's the true cross? St. Helena, you can barely see it. It's the left stained glass window over there. It shows St. Helena with the cross. And she went to Jerusalem. She was the mother of Constantine, the emperor. She was sent to Jerusalem to find the true cross and to find other relics. And she found all 3 crosses, and to determine which one was the true cross, the local bishop suggested that she take someone who was ill and see if the person would be healed, and the person was healed when they got to the cross, the true cross. You know, it's been, I've only been here since 1996. I came here originally in the early 80s, and it was there. There is a place up here you can see where the tabernacle used to be in the middle of the high altar, and that was when the altar was this way, right? And the priest had his back to the people, and the priest would say Mass, face this direction, correct? Yeah. So I'd say it was before the 80s for sure, yeah. Yeah, probably after the Second Vatican Council, yeah. So on the bottom level here, you have the 4 first doctors of the church. St. Jerome, who translated the scriptures into Latin. It's called the Vulgate. St. Augustine, there you go, Father Hakeem. St. Augustine's one of the first 4 doctors of the church. St. Ambrose is also depicted with the beehive because of his wonderful preaching. And you have the St. Ambrose bees here in Davenport. That's their mascot. And then St. Gregory the Great, who was Pope, and he's wearing a crown. The Pope was crowned up until St. John Paul I was the first Pope that was not. He chose not to be crowned Pope, and then St. John Paul II kept that tradition going. So, but before that time, the Pope was crowned. Yeah, good. I don't know. I don't have all this. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, you can find books on Christian art that will tell you things like the martyrs being depicted with their, and the symbols of the evangelists. Excuse me, I'm going to grab. Yeah. This is the altar stone, and most consecrated chapels also have an altar stone that contains the relic of a martyr inside the stone. And the reason for that is because before Christianity was legalized in the Roman Empire, they would celebrate Mass on the tombs of the martyrs in the catacombs. And so now they have relics of martyrs in the altar stones of most consecrated altars. It used to, for years it was not known whose relic was here, and then Father Ken, who was a former pastor here in the 90s and early 2000s, found a safe in the rectory that had 3 relics in it and paperwork for 4 relics. And the paperwork for the 4th relic was for this altar stone, and it said that it's a relic of St. Peter. And so St. Peter's depicted up there with the keys to the kingdom, the book of life. And then on the opposite side here, you have St. John, who was the only disciple who was not martyred for the faith. And he's depicted with the chalice, and it's because of this beautiful chapter 6 of St. John's Gospel that talks about the bread of life. And Jesus saying, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. I do not know what the relic of St. Peter is. Yeah. I don't know that either. Father Ken would have done with them what was done. And it may have been that the cross the pieces of the cross was one of those relics, because he was the one who discovered that we had a piece of the true cross too. So, yeah. Over on this side is the St. Joseph altar. And if you don't want to have to crane your neck as much, you can go back down the steps. And, and the banner above Joseph's head says, Ite ad Joseph, so Latin for go to Joseph, right? And where is that quote in Scripture? Go to Joseph. Anyone know? Yeah, so it's in the book of Genesis. It's in Genesis chapter 43, I believe, where Pharaoh puts Joseph of the Old Testament in charge of everything in Egypt. And he's the one that gathers the grains. So they have 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And during the years of famine, everyone from Egypt and from surrounding countries came to Egypt for food, and they would say to the Pharaoh, where can we get food? And the Pharaoh said, go to Joseph. So the Pharaoh was the first one to say, go to Joseph. But we're also encouraged to go to Joseph, Saint Joseph, the father, the foster father of Jesus, with our prayers. I started a group here in Iowa City called the Fathers of St. Joseph. The original founder is in the Quad Cities. And so St. Joseph is one of my patron saints because he's a husband, father, and a homeschooler, and we homeschool all of our children. And so he's a mentor of mine. And so I encourage you to consider Joseph as a mentor, especially husbands, fathers, and people who are mentors to other people, men and women. St. Joseph was a carpenter, and so in the left side depiction here, you have him with some of the tools of the trade, and Jesus is an infant. St. Joseph is also the patron of a happy death. Why is that? Because probably Jesus and Mary were with Joseph when he died, right? So that's depicted on the right side there. And we would like to have Jesus and Mary with us when we die, so we ask St. Joseph, who's the patron of a happy death, to intercede for us on our behalf. On the right side of St. Joseph is St. Anthony of Padua, and I forgot to mention that there's a St. Anthony shrine back there by the Confessional, St. Anthony's Bread. It's a particular charity of St. Mary's Church that's been going for about 40 years. And in 40 years, they've distributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to people in Iowa City, sometimes through the Crisis Center Food Bank, sometimes through other Johnson County groups, and really have done a lot to help the people who are falling through the cracks, who had used up all their money in other places in Iowa City. Various things like fuel bills, and even to something as small as paying for a haircut for someone who needed a haircut to go to an interview, things like that. So St. Anthony's Bread really helps out. St. Anthony's depicted with the infant Jesus. And St. Anthony lived in a time when there was no electricity. And at one point, his brothers in his religious order saw this light emanating from his cell, and they went to see what was going on, and they saw the infant Jesus with St. Anthony in his cell in the monastery. On the left side is St. Aloysius, my son who's doing the taping tonight. His name is Matthew Aloysius, so he's got Matthew up here and Aloysius over here. And St. Aloysius is the patron saint of youth. And on Sunday mornings in the fall, if you come here to St. Mary's early morning mass, 8:30, sun's shining through that stained glass window, and St. Aloysius' hair is purple, which I think is perfect for the patron saint of youth to have purple hair, right? So, if you turn around and look back in the balcony, you'll see the oldest organ in Iowa City, and that a lot of times the organs in Catholic churches are named, and this one is named Sancta Cecilia. You'll see the name across the front there, the patroness of music. So that's the 30-minute tour. If you come back sometime in the daylight, I could show you more of the stained glass windows, and I could take you in the sacristy to show you the vestments and various things used at Mass. But I encourage you, if you'd like to purchase one of these books, do come back. You can do a self-guided tour. I will be doing a tour again on the Tuesday after Easter for the RCI group at 7 o'clock, Tuesday, April 19th. And so then we'll be able to see some of the stained glass, and we'll do the sacristy stuff too. But thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Any questions? Sure. Anything that predates this building? That's a good question. There's only one thing, and I can take you downstairs and show it to you. There's a stained glass window from the original church that was on this site. That's the only thing that I'm aware of from the original building that was here. Yeah. Yeah. I'll take you down and show it. It's hooked up with a light so you can light it up from behind and stuff too. So yeah. Any other questions? I've been in the bell tower once, and that was just kind of a chance thing. I came to a Knights of Columbus meeting, and they were going to be cleaning upstairs, and oh, it's amazing. There's 17 bells in the bell tower. Oh, there's another story about St. Mary's. The first bell that was put in St. Mary's Church was donated by a parishioner, so it came into town on a wagon. It was the original church. They installed it in the bell tower, and then they found out a few months later that the guy was lying. This bell had arrived in Iowa City. He said that he had purchased it for the church. They installed it, but it was actually for a church in Wisconsin. And so it was already installed, and so I imagine the pastor at the time said, well, okay, we'll just pay for a bell for that church in Wisconsin. But I think they kind of tarred and feathered the guy. I don't think he was a regular parishioner after that, So. But I've been in the bell tower once, and I've walked the catwalk the length of this thing and gone down by those stained glass windows. It's amazing. The guy that was with me, my fellow knight, said, if you fall, I'm going to drag you out to the street and say that you died out there. It's just plaster. You'd fall right through. If you came off the catwalk, you'd fall right through. But, no, the catwalk goes down the middle, and then there's a ladder type steps going down there and going down there on both sides. So there's no connecting across the top. Yeah. There's extra storage above both sacristies, where they have the nativity scene and the baptismal font for Easter and so on. So there's storage places above there. But yeah, when you go up in the bell tower, you have to duck underneath the big beams that are holding the bells, and you can see some people have written their name and dates up there. So it's kind of fun. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you. Yeah.